We see Jeho sitting down in the Luxy Forest, checking the system about the plant journal. Althea's plant journal. In the next moment, he pulls a book out of the system and taps on a page. The system then shows a list of flowers Jeho was standing around and their observation progress. Jeho then realizes that this was how the information was being recorded in the system. He was so excited to fill up the journal with more information about the plants in the Luxy Forest, and so decided to head out. As Jeho walked, notices kept popping up of different flowers he has found and that his observation of them will be stored in the journal. Jeho then wonders to himself about hoping to not stray too far from the forest. Then he realizes a floating seed and it took note of the direction it was coming from. To his surprise, there was a spread of glossing blue flowers which shimmered in the distance. Jeho wondered to himself what kind of place this was. Then he realized they were Eiffel's flowers, and as he walked through the field he noticed that one of the Eiffels had not yet bloomed. He then crouched to the flowers, thinking of that one time he had a garden, and in the 8th grade when one of his flowers did not bloom. He was very sad that that flower was the only one that had not yet bloomed and decided to take special care of the plant until it did. Jeho watered it every day, played classical music and gave it positive affirmations daily until the plant finally bloomed. He then congratulated the plant on its hard work to bloom, and the moment even made Jeho teared up. This moment of happiness was short-lived, as the next moment the plant was crushed by a bully who decided to confront Jeho on the fact that there was a rumor that he was growing a poisonous plant in the garden. This was a rumor, however, he was convinced after taking one look at Jeho's face. On that day Jeho cried, the flower cried and the bully cried. I failed back then, Jeho said to the plant, but this time, in going to succeed, I'll help you bloom. The system then alerted Jeho that he had found the eternally unblooming Eiffel's flower, and Jeho wondered to himself why it was called an unblooming flower and thought that it looks just like the other Eiffel's flowers. That didn't stop Jeho though. He just reaffirmed to himself and the flower that he too is quite the stubborn one, and that was a trait he picked up from his dad. A notification then pops up with the observation progress of the eternally unblooming Eiffel's flower, and that its progress was at 10% and is not able to bloom as yet. An hour later, and Jeho thought to himself that if the plant was a regular Eiffel's flower it wouldn't have been logged in his journal as a separate flower. Jeho then thought to himself how he has been sitting around without any progress. He then decided that he needed more information and then started to head to the starting village. Wow! It has been 3 hours since Jeho logged in, and now he is deciding to go to the starting village. Jeho headed to Tryon Village, the village of the elves, and wondered to himself if he was at the right place. He then remembered what was said about the difficulty of the Luxy Forest due to the elves' hostility towards humans. But then thought to himself that this was just a game, and that it can't be that bad. He then approached a group of elves and greeted them. However, Jeho was demanded to stop approaching and not enter their village. Jeho thought that he knew they were aggressive, but he never knew it was this much. Before Jeho could utter another word, one of the elves said to the other that he was an idiot for speaking to a monster. Jeho is the monster being referred to here. The other elf confirmed and said she was right, as Jeho stood there perplexed. They then decided to just attack Jeho, lunging at him while screaming, "Die, you filthy monster!" Jeho was upset and questioned what about him gave them the right to consider him a monster. However, the face and the aura around Jeho were very convincing to be that of a monster, and the elves then realized he was getting angry and had their guard up as they shouted, "It's starting to growl!" With a swing of their hand, they started to throw punches at Jeho, to which Jeho assumed a defensive stance and had his guard up while bobbing and weaving. The elves were surprised to see Jeho's movements. Jeho then thinks to himself that the elves would never hit him with the way they were punching, as his defense is flawless, as it was thought by no other than his father. We then see a flashback of Jeho going through rigorous training methods while his father barks instructions at him. That training was done as Jeho's dad wanted him to be more than just the ordinary MMA fighter. No, he wanted Jeho to be the best MMA fighter the world has ever seen. Back to the present, we see Jeho still bobbing and weaving and thinking to himself about the rumor he heard that players without an aptitude for fighting in the real world will not have won in the game. As such, he is confident of his skills in fighting against the high-level elves. Jeho then throws a powerful punch at the elf fighting him, to which the elf is visibly shocked. Jeho is left with a bland look as he reads a notification which says he's unable to do any damage as the elves severely outleveled him. The elf then congratulates Jeho for his fighting ability despite being a monster, to which the other elf commented that they didn't know there was a monster like that in the Luxie Forest. Jeho then shouted he has had enough of their remarks and thought the elves were just making fun of him. When the elves heard him speak they thought he was a demon, to which Jeho shouted that he was not a demon but a human, an immortal to be exact. Side note: an immortalian is what players are referred to in the game by NPCs as when they die they are seen revived moments later, as if nothing happened. The elves were surprised to hear this and said, "With a face like that?" To which Jeho screamed, "What's wrong with my face?" The elves didn't believe him and asked for further proof of his claims to be an immortalian. The elves then stopped and started to sniff Jeho, as Jeho asked in concern as to what they were doing. The elves then said that he has the smell of Eiffel's flowers, in shock. A notification then pops up over Jeho's head stating that he has acquired the title of "Do you like flowers?" and as such he has a greater advantage when befriending elves. Jeho then realizes how the game works, and he can see a change in the way the elves now see him, as they now recognize him as an immortalian. Jeho then explained himself and his reason for coming to the village, as he is really an immortalian, and he doesn't want to fight, and is only seeking information on the Eiffel's flower. The elves were shocked to hear him mention the Eiffel's flower and wanted to know why he would like to learn about them as they are common in Luxie Forest. Jeho said with a shy look on his face which can be easily mistaken for someone telling lies, that he simply was trying to grow one. The elves then whispered to themselves as to whether or not Jeho was trying to trick them. Jeho, recognizing this, states that he would like to clarify, and that he isn't just trying to grow anyone but the eternally unblooming Eiffel's flower. The elves were startled to hear this, and could not believe what Jeho just said. Jeho was confused and asked what was wrong. Then a notification pops up saying he has survived an encounter with a foe to which he was severely outleveled against, as such his fame has increased.